Arab world has forever changed, and so has the media. Some would argue governance, as we've known it, is also changing. Business is certainly changing. In fact, the whole world might be changing too. The question is social media the catalyst? My simple answer is yes. For just over the past year, I've been fortunate enough to be immersed in a series of chaotic and fateful events that had deprived me of sleep, catapulted my career, but most importantly, connected me through social media, at times quite intimately, to my shared generation of Arab brothers and sisters fighting for the right to self-determination. After decades of oppression and dictatorship, a revolutionary spirit, led primarily by the region's youth and fueled by social media, has risen across the Middle East and North Africa, challenging the governments in power, their relationship with the West, and the role of religion, women, and democracy in society. But it's also challenged, perhaps unintentionally, the mainstream media. Last fall, I had the privilege of speaking at the Google Zeitgeist conference in Arizona about Arabs reclaiming their identity and essentially their right to self-determination. But this certainly could not have been possible without the use of social media and the relentless pace of social media and the democratization of media. Social media connected these young Arabs to like-minded individuals, like myself, some in the media industry, across the region, but beyond. Perhaps the most important connection was with the media. It eliminated the impulse of parachute journalism, something, on a personal note, I find quite offensive and tragic, if unavoidable. And it's also as ineffective, I might add, as it is costly. What it did is it offered them a new source for news gathering that President Bush once famously or infamously called the internets. But just as the Arab world is going through a period of revolution, the media is also undergoing a symbiotic revolution. There's been much speculation, for example, as to how central a role social media has played in these revolutions. At the beginning, Tunisia was called the Jasmine Revolution or the Twitter Revolution. But little has been discussed about its role in another revolution, the media revolution. Here's a quick anecdote. 2 nights ago, I was in my hotel room trying to get my beauty sleep, and basically, I was watching Men in Black on the obscenely large television in my room. I hope some of you at least have a similar sized TV, because it's quite a spectacle. I watched as photos of live streams of anti-war protests clashing with police at the NATO summit in Chicago. It was streaming through my laptop, and within minutes, as I was tweeting, another live stream emerged from Lebanon. It popped into my Twitter feed, documenting RPG and machine gun fire that was sustained for 5 hours. This was the worst violence that Lebanon had seen in perhaps over a decade. There I was, in my bed, aggregating tweets and live video, calling up sources on the ground, curating the story, using crowdsourced Google Maps, basically using social media as a news gathering tool and pushing it out to my 12,000 Twitter followers in real time in over 141 countries. That, my friends, is the new age of journalism, whether we're comfortable with it or not. I stayed up till about 3 a.m. in somewhat of a late-night menage a trois, except instead of lovers, it was my laptop and my mobile phone, of which I'm slightly embarrassed, and I'm definitely too in love with. And seriously, on a side note, my family has actually sat me down and had an intervention about this, but that's another story altogether, and I might discredit myself if I get into it, so I won't. But for decades, on a serious note, leaders in media and governments have championed the ordinary citizen's right to information as a fundamental human right. And for just as long in the Arab world, citizens have been denied and deprived this fundamental right. 50% of the world is under 30. I'm included. In the Arab world, it's 70%. These young people have turned to the internet to engage with others, share grievances, and mobilize to challenge the status quo. Since then, we've seen this same spirit of civic engagement spill from the virtual realm into the streets. And as the internet penetration grew and the economic situation worsened, millions of young, unemployed, but educated youth acted out, including one notable man in Tunisia, Mohamed Bouazizi, whose story I'm sure you're all hopefully familiar with, and if you're not, well, quite frankly, you can Google it. That same week, I had arrived to DC to launch The Stream for Al Jazeera, an award-winning interactive talk show that aimed to tap into conversations that were very much already happening on social media and leverage their voices in order to report on underreported stories. I stumbled across the hashtag Sidi Bouzid, which was the town that Mohammed Bouazizi was from. Immediately, I called up hundreds of photos and videos showing student protests, police abuses, sporadic gunfire, and within a matter of minutes, I was able to connect with a gentleman on the ground named Ahmed. I was Skyping with him. He told me school was canceled. I asked him why, and he sent me photos as well, but he didn't seem to have an answer. He said because state TV said so, and they didn't have an answer either. I tried to look on the wires. I really did. To corroborate the video, as any journalist might, to look for another source, but there was nothing in the wires. Absolutely nothing. There I was, watching this horrible video that he had sent me of a guy's head, frankly, being blown off in a hospital somewhere near Sidi Bouzid. And I couldn't help but think to myself, where the hell is the media? As the messages went viral, protests broke out across the world, showing solidarity with what was happening in Tunisia, in Geneva, in Lausanne, in Egypt, in Algeria, Berlin, and even London. I realized the beginning of a revolution was unfolding, and thanks to social media, I had a front row seat. For more than a week, I watched the story unfold, speaking to activists, using Facebook, Skype, Twitter, as protests turned bloody. And it wasn't until January 12th, with Ben Ali's regime on the verge of collapse, that Time magazine finally found the story. Despite social media's challenging of the state's intimidation and targeting of journalists in Bahrain, Syria, and Egypt, many continued to crack down on dissent. But through citizen reporting and mobilization on social media, their stories could simply not be suppressed. Google, quite frankly, did not play a small part, working with Twitter, collaborating to launch Speak to Tweet, allowing voice messages from mobile phones to be translated then into tweets to share information from the ground in Egypt when Mubarak decided to shut off the 4 ISP providers and essentially shut down the internet. Still, according to Freedom House, overall global freedom of the press did not decline for the first time in 8 years in the region, and social media played a big part. Now, I'm going to play a very short clip from a show we did on the stream that won a Royal Television Society Award for Innovative News for its in-depth analysis of the ongoing struggle in Bahrain. Cue the video, please.
Today, the political unrest in Bahrain may have been forgotten by much of the world, but netizens are pulling out all the stops to keep this debate alive.
The government, like the cowards that they are, attacked peaceful protesters in the middle of the night while they were sleeping.
We've gotten so many comments on Facebook. We have a tweet from Activate Bahrain saying,
We're getting a lot of questions on Google+.
Sure.
We're going to go to the first one from Michael Osterling.
Is there evidence that the Iranian Republican Guard is actually active in Bahrain?
I'm sure Suhail is getting very uncomfortable being on the same show with me when I'm accusing Sons of the King of torture and talking about how the king himself should be on trial.
So the girl on Skype that you saw in that interview is Zainab al-Khawaja. She's the daughter of Abdelhadi al-Khawaja, the head of Bahrain's Center for Human Rights, who was taken from his home in front of his family, beaten, tortured, and put in prison. He's been on hunger strike for over 80 days. You may have noticed that she accused the Crown Prince of Bahrain of torture. I mean, think about that for a minute. While this allegation was the first time it was being made on international television, she and thousands more had made it for months on Twitter and Facebook with retweets. And it's worth mentioning that the way I booked her for the show is through Twitter. Talk about changing methods in journalism. So as she made these allegations, I literally felt my heart skip a beat because I was very aware, as someone who is also Kuwaiti and grew up in the region, the dangers that she could put herself in. And my producer, apparently, was also just as aware. Right when she spoke, he literally said, fortunately, she was a she. She said, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And this is what I'm hearing in my IFB. Meanwhile, there's Twitter, and I'm trying to follow the tweets. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, is this girl going to get killed? So I made it a point to say, you know, right before the show ended, we're going to be following you on Twitter, and you know, we just want to make sure that we continue this story and tracking the story. The reason being, it was an attempt by me to just try and protect her, whether you think that's acceptable in journalism or not. The show included, just very quickly, 2 guests on Skype, a Google Hangout with 6 members from across the world, thousands on Twitter tweeting in to challenge what was being said by our studio guests. That, to me, is the magic of social media. Twitter alone has changed the way we as global citizens, forget journalists, communicate, and the way wars are covered, especially when governments ban journalists from entry to the country. Twitter ultimately becomes the wires. In this democratized media environment where the authoritative is drowned out by the masses, and immediacy and transparency trump objectivity, videos documenting demolitions and disfigurements expose enough in real time for us to grasp the reality based on sheer volume, even when what we are seeing is not immediately verifiable. Even in the face of a death toll reportedly upwards of 12,000, potentially much higher, the Syrian government officials and Assad supporters with whom I've spoken both on Al Jazeera and off camera seem to echo one refrain in their defense. Where is your proof relating to the citizen journalism and the videos? When Syria refuses to allow journalists in to cover the story, where does the burden of truth or proof rest? I'm sure my colleague Paul Conroy has a fitting answer. Does it rest with the activists who are documenting destruction and sharing it with the world through social media, or with the government, which is actively trying to shut the world out and kill this story? You can doubt the veracity of one video, 10 videos perhaps, but can you doubt the veracity of thousands of videos? Every day while we were at the stream, we would sift through hundreds of videos that were sent to us from all over the world, not just the Arab world, but specifically Bahrain, where activists had set up webcams in Shia villages to document police abuses, cops throwing tear gas into the roofs of homes, killing people, slashing tires, breaking car windows. Al Jazeera was banned, journalists were detained, but the pictures kept streaming through. But rather than simply use their materials to tell stories, we decided to open up the editorial process. We wanted to use Storify to help them tell their own stories. Let's just play that video quickly.
Storify is a narrative tool for the social media age. Log in with your Twitter account. Search what people are saying on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, pretty much anywhere on the web, then rearrange them any way you like. Add your own explanations and thoughts, and publish your story for the world to see. Share those stories with us, and they, and you, might just wind up in the stream.
Now, I'm running short on time, so I might speak a little quickly, but the New York Times called our coverage at Al Jazeera's moment. But this was not Al Jazeera's moment. This was the people's moment. Al Jazeera, like social media, played a crucial role in amplifying and accelerating their voices, connecting them with millions throughout the region. When I graduated from Columbia Journalism School, I landed a job at the New York Times producing the world page on their website. I was 22 and the envy of some of my colleagues who were double my age. But after 6 months, I quickly felt stifled. It was too stiff, too arrogant, too old school, frankly, for me, concerned with this false sense of objectivity, and at the time, it wasn't innovative enough. Back to today, a few months ago, I resigned from Al Jazeera because a truly disruptive project came up that I couldn't turn down. At Zeitgeist last year, I met Ariana Huffington, who went on stage right after my speech, and she started speaking of the Ahmed model, which was new to me since I myself was not familiar with my own model. But the point being, we both agreed that as journalists, we're humans. We have emotions, we have morals, we have values, and at least the aspirations of morality, and that is what should matter in journalism. Now, very quickly, fast forward 6 months, there I was in Vienna giving my mom a foot rub, as any good Arab son might do. I know we have an Arab over there, so perhaps he can relate. And the phone rang. It was Ariana, and after a lengthy phone conversation, she convinced me to be part of her new online streaming network, an opportunity to take what I had learned at the stream and bring it to the next level, and then some. Now, the project is called HuffPost Live, and it aims to really disrupt this TV media environment that, quite frankly, is failing us. And I say that humbly, hopefully not with arrogance. This summer, it plans to launch. It's going to be an online network that uses the stories, the editors, the reporters, the bloggers, and the commenters as its real-time script. It'll be driven by the community, and we will be leveraging their voices rather than the same old talking heads that we're accustomed to seeing on many TV networks. Now, just to give you some quick perspective on this, the Huffington Post, which celebrated its 7-year anniversary 2 weeks ago, has more unique page views and visitors than the New York Times. The New York Times is 161 years old, and the Huffington Post is 7 years old. Now, if there's anything you remember from my speech, it should be that the democratization of the Arab world or any society is directly related to the democratization of its media. We must all recognize that collaboration should trump competition. Democratization should trump authoritarianism. It took us at the Huffington Post 7 years to get to 100 million comments. 7 years, 100 million comments. In the last 6 months, we added 50 million comments. So the timing is now.